Everybody, Kelly Justice here at the Philosophy Society. It is October 2nd, 2024. We're in the library, room 860. We have some new people in the room today. Very great. And then some other people coming. We're scheduled to do a movie today, and I'd like to start it soon. So I'm going to do a little talk on the fly. So kind of the structure of the group. So philosophy is love of wisdom, right? And wisdom, I think it's important to have a sense of like what we mean by that, right? And when we study philosophy academically, like there's being a student and then there's like being a philosopher. All students have to go to lectures, really. There's someone teaching them usually, unless they do it themselves. They learn by content. I think learning through observation and experiential learning like that is different. You wouldn't really, like you could say student of life, you know, maybe like you're testing the environment and seeing what happens. Like it's almost being like a folks experimental scientist.
Yeah, I naivete at all times.
Sorry?
I naivete at all times.
Yeah. And so that's you're a student of the cosmos, but that's not really what we mean when we say student, you know? So I think that there's a sense of wisdom. So when you're being a philosopher, that's not just reading books, right? Like reading a cookbook doesn't make you a chef. You know, like you have to be engaged in a practice. And so when we say like philosophy or being a philosopher, like one thing that I say is if you had a group of human beings, which properties would you designate to distinguish that one person from the group, right?
For that person being a philosopher.
Yeah, you're like that person because they do these things, and then you can see them do those things, right?
Right. So it's the practice of philosophy as opposed to the identity that
one. You touch base on that recipe. You're saying it's almost like Stoicism. There's a recipe that you have to go by.
That's what
to a certain extent. Right?
That's what all philosophies are.
Right.
The history of philosophies are little recipes, but we can. How do we evaluate whether it's good or not? One would be like the recipe actually helps you cook food, right? And so the recipe, the philosophy, makes you more wise. And I think that's kind of what I would like to say wisdom is. It's like I can kind of see the landscape in advance and know not to run that way. You know,
cooking food could actually engage in some wisdom, like Oliver's, say Jamie Oliver, with keen awareness of what he's doing at that moment, could correlate with something, an analogy of maybe when he's cooking, of something that he picked of some herbs with Mother Nature. So, you know what I'm saying? So everything in life, in every aspect, every motion, every movement that you're involved with is part of integration. So as opposed to an isolation.
Okay.
So I'm getting the premise.
Yeah. So there's a wholeness to our experience.
Right. Exactly. See?
Yeah.
Exactly.
For sure.
Integration.
That's like a Gestalt psychology thing. You know, but I don't think that everything is the same and nothing is distinct though. Like there are like this is different than this.
Very true. Yeah, you could see the difference.
Yeah. But they're made of matter. We could say like the integration or like the fundamental forces of the universe.
See, you're looking in the deeper macro depths of that. So as you just said that, you see the distinction, but then you went to the matter, and then you get into the composites and so forth and so forth. You go into the new.
Yeah. So when we think of the cosmos or our existence, it's like this is like there's mathematics and physics, and then there's a telescoping layeredness to how we understand like reality. You know, like on one end, there's math, like the usage of symbols and language to produce consistent results that's objective. You know, like it doesn't matter unless I make an error. The subjectivity is just the error. You know, you didn't do your calculations correct. But if you take it and you do it, you can get to the same solution that I did, right? Doesn't matter who you are.
Very true.
And
so
then,
how do you figure? I have a question. Now, how do you figure out, to your point, which pieces fit? Like, what's the ideal fit, if that makes sense? Because you can combine things together and make it make sense for you, but we don't know if that's the ideal making sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So ideal, like, what do we mean by ideal? And part of what I like to say is that, like, one interpretation could be like it's correct. Like 1 + 1 is 2. Like we would just say that's correct. There's an ideal practice, but really that all that means is you're just going to get correct solutions frequently, right? And so I think we want to like focus on what we're gonna like. What are we idealizing or what are we abstracting? And there's different kinds of things, you know. And so the idealization will look a little different. Like you can think of the idea. I was a carpenter for a while, so I used to use carpenter. So there's the ideal house, you know, and everyone will have a different ideal house. Kind of like what kind of art you would produce, you know, like your objective and subjective identity, like who you are and the things that you've chosen to become that just kind of, that's a creativity. It's like that's your being, and then you just make something, and it's distinct, like when we cook.
Right.
It can-
Any gardening or whatever could be applicable. Depends on the inspiration at that moment if it arises. Because sometimes people are absent-minded, and sometimes they're in that present moment, and it's like an epiphany, and it's like a quakening. And they're not even philosophers. They just could be laymen. They could be a carpenter or stonemason or a gardener. So
Would that be intuition, you think?
it could be intuition in depth of something of a soul touch connection. So it's not like,
I'm just going to do a quick.
but it
Someone
doesn't mean
else's here.
now he's a philosopher.
Right.
It could be just that his analogy of some sort of his way of expressing something that relates to him at that moment or her.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you can't always control the circumstances.
Right. I think that goes back to your point at the beginning about dreams, right? How all the dreams are kind of individualized. Like people talk about Carl Jung, but Carl Jung was writing about himself, like the Red Book, his dream. It wasn't a prescription of how one should regard their own dreams or what one should do. It's really, he says, it's a reflection of me and my process. And a lot of people, I think, make that mistake from what I've heard and just try to apply all of his principles to themselves, and they get lost because it's about him, not about.
Sure. And then are the dreams ours? So that's the thing.
Right.
See, when people get obsessed that we think like our thoughts are ours, right?
Yes.
And they could be just passing clouds.
Yes.
And because then they build up on patterns and obsessiveness because they just keep on compounding because they're obsessed with patterns.
That's troublesome for me personally.
Yeah, so that's why you have to look at the thoughts as an objective or subjective outside sometimes. But is that really my thought? Where did that arise? If you're conscious and conscientious and conscious, aware of that moment, you're going to go, wait, I don't want to hide that thought. So look at it, just disengage, like a light switch or like a passive cloud. So you learn that in meditation and stuff like that. So
that's the one I'm going to reconcile to is the meditative aspect with the philosophical aspect.
Well, let's just go right back to what you said at the beginning, because we took a detour and we can see. I want you to feel that you got to express this, and then we can talk about it.
Sure.
So, what was the first thing? Let's go right to the very beginning.
Yeah.
What was the first thing you wanted to ask me? Do you remember that? How you phrased that question?
Yes. It was around self-sabotage.
Okay.
And how sometimes we have intentions or we have goals, we have visions, but we don't end up doing the things that we know we need to do or want to do to actually achieve our goals. And why is this happening? Why can't I do it? I know what I have to do. It's clear, but yet I'm not doing it. So I think Aristotle called it like a self-destructive tendency.
Okay.
Or even in the Bible, it says, Paul says, that which I do not want to do, I do, and that which I want to do, I do not, or something. So it seems like this echo in history of we know what needs to be done, but sometimes we just can't seem to get there.
well,
Yes.
you're engaged sometimes because sometimes those obsessiveness, what Paul is saying, is that it's like they feel good about it. Those pulsations that are sometimes could be of negative nature,
Temptations.
temptations and things like that, and you think it's good. You know what I'm saying? So it's deluding to the person.
Yeah.
So,
And I think the bridge that I can't cross is the one that we were just talking about, which is the difference between eliminating all the thoughts that we think are not ours, and then but figuring out, well, philosophy is really about words and expanding on things and getting to concepts, applying those concepts differently. How to marry those two, but practically speaking, to your point at the beginning, where we're not just philosophers in our brains, we're actually doing
the thing.
So that's the question of doing.
Okay, so we'll do two couple connections here. So the philosophy society, what is that? Because there's academic philosophy, and you can just take classes. And so me reinventing that wheel is not really what I'm doing, right? It's a different thing. It's more analogous to a non-denominational or a non-deity organization that has similar functions that religious groups do, but there's no faith. And we try to reduce the appeal to authority by basing it on a merit. So, again, the other thing, okay, all of your thoughts are yours. They are your thoughts. That's and the reason is because they're happening in my mind, and I am the causal factor of them. and I'm in control of what I do with that thought, right? There may be intrusive thoughts, and we can see those from like
That's a good word.
PTSD.
That come in and invade.
Yeah.
That's right. That's a good word. Yeah.
And then there's like modes of thinking. There's when we have string thoughts together, right? And so my interpretation or my perception of reality can sometimes be incorrect. I was just writing this the other day, last night, to one of these professor guys. He's cool. His name's Satchel. I like him as a guy. And so there's the thing in itself, and that may exist or not. So if you go looking for like the pot of gold, like that, the reason that's supposed to be funny is because we know it doesn't exist, right? And so your perception of what you might think it is, you're like, I think I saw it in the forest one day, but it was really just the way that the light was reflecting on a rock, and your boat just kept on going. So it doesn't actually exist, right? Mm-hmm. The second mode of like error is I'm just trying to be nice. Usually I say God, but we haven't. I don't know you guys that well yet, so we'll wait.
Oh, I'm good with God. I'm good with God. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm an atheist, so I just try to like. I want to take it easy with people because it can be very sensitive.
You have the right to your opinions, right?
Yeah. But I use other examples, or like ghosts. Some people might be a little sensitive about ghosts, but pot of gold's super easy. Like, you know, no one gets upset. Unless you're saying it's like
hungry ghosts are like hungry hippos.
Honey hippos?
Hungry hippos.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like a game.
They're never satiated.
Well, the hungry ghosts, you always offered an orange because they're always hungry.
Okay.
So you have to feed it something because it feeds off you.
Okay.
And that's how those pervasive, intrusive thoughts are.
Okay.
It feeds off you. It's a negative energy. So
it could be good and bad.
Yes, because it's taxing on some people. Some people do feel fatigued.
First layer of error could be, what does the thing exist or not, right? And then we could like try to figure that out. And then the second thing is my perception of it, right? So in the classic example is refraction, when they put like a pencil in a thing of water and it looked like bent, right? The pencil exists. It's just because of the medium of light passing through water and air, it's different, right? It's we're just not able to perceive that. It's just not the way our eyes register light, or there's no counterbalance thing to self-correct. Like the nerve that's going in front of your eye, your mind actually fills in that gap, right? But you actually have like a blind spot in your vision. You just don't even know.
Yeah, the glass is actually twisting the reality of it. The glass, it's just like a prism, right? Same thing with light, the refraction or a raindrop. You can see the colors of the rain.
Yeah. So there's perception, right? And then the last stage is like our language, the way we describe things to ourselves, right? And so it being our thoughts is important, because if they weren't your thoughts, that's kind of where you can start going down the path of schizophrenia and psychosis, right? Like people are speaking to me in my mind, and maybe it is true. Let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it is the case that there is some thing that we just don't know about yet. We'd have to demonstrate that somehow, right? We'd have to just, okay, let's show it to me. Then we go back to the first point of the existence thing, right? Nash is a great example. The mathematician did work with game theory. There's that movie, A Beautiful Mind, with Russell Crowe. And so, yeah, he was schizophrenic. And the way that in the movie he figured it out was that and usually people don't have visual hallucinations. Like it's usually they have auditory hallucinations, like someone speaking to you. And so he just recognized in the film, maybe it's like a Hollywood thing, but that the characters that he was hallucinating didn't age. And then it just hit him. He's like, that can't be possible, you know?
Sure. So then from that framework, he built up kind of like a reservoir to always remind himself that they're the same age, right? Mm-hmm. And that so he kept it it's almost like a note, a reminder, so that it wouldn't hurt him or affect him. So it's a good thing what you said there.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, like, because if our thoughts or our perceptions can hurt us, that's one of those, you wouldn't say that that's a wise thing, right? That self-destruction. And going back to your point, it can be that my appraisal of myself was incorrect, and that my expectations are unrealistic, or that, so in David Burns' book, that's one of the books that we went through a couple years ago, and now we're finishing The 7 Habits.
Feeling good?
Yes. It just teaches like the philosophy of CBT and how to apply it. So that's taking our thoughts and then doing something with them.
Mhm.
And then philosophically, we talk about critical thinking, you know? So CBT is almost like critical thinking for your emotional state,
No, that's interesting.
right?
Critical, as opposed to cognitive, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. So you're saying something different than CBT? I've
So-
never heard of that term before. I heard cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah. Critical thinking is what philosophers refer to when they discuss being analytic.
Mhm.
And it's the way that we evaluate our beliefs, opinions, what other people say, and evidence.
Okay.
Or arguments too. That's like a technical thing.
So did you say CBT or did you say CT?
Yeah. So critical thinking is like the philosophical
Right.
thing to talk about. And it's really more about like validity and soundness
Mhm.
when it comes to reasoning. Whereas CBT, cognitive, right, behavioral therapy, is a therapeutic technique that we use for regulating our emotions. And so you say, well, it doesn't work for everybody, you know, these kinds of things. Sure. And what I would like to do is first, let's just kind of rule things out, like the process of elimination. Let's falsify the thesis. Does this person not think in a distorted way? First of all, have they learned to are they like an autodidact in the sense they can train themselves and teach themselves behaviors that are healthy for them, right? And to every degree, like addiction in some ways is our inability to like teach ourselves to get out of this pattern of behavior, you know? And so
So the
now,
root of that-
sorry,
Yeah.
to interject, sorry. But some people need someone like you or someone, a professional, to inform them.
Yeah.
But if they're not consciously aware of what they're that vice that they're in,
Yeah.
you're saying that not distorted reality
Yeah.
of the critical thinking.
Yeah.
But they not be acceptable. That's a problem too.
So that's what the Philosophy Society is for.
Right.
The Philosophy Society is a group that is ongoing because the class ends, right? It's ongoing where we get to practice. Like the reason my merit may be high, one is I choose to be here, right? The second thing is that not only that choice, but I bring in a lot of other information that I just share. And it's not about me knowing everything, it's about me practicing too, right? Like I did martial arts for like 10 years in Thunder Bay, long time, like almost 10 hours a week at certain points. And, you know, you get to a point where you've learned everything, but now you need to create an environment where you can continue to increase your skill. You know, you have to challenge yourself. It's just like exercise is very similar. And so to be the best is to know what your learning curve is and to create that environment that will challenge you. And so there has to be some awareness and acceptance that that's just how learning and growth is, and a value for growth. Recently, like last winter, someone was like, well, I don't think growing is a good thing. I just like myself the way I am. Okay, I guess so. You can have your opinion if you want. I just don't know if it's wise, you know?
On that topic, I think like growth and nurturing are two different but similar concepts. And that's perhaps what it's not about expanding, but keeping and nurturing and maintaining. And it's just a different school of thought.
And I like that word though, nurturing,
Mhm.
because it's almost like by nurturing, you're not actively trying to grow, but you grow as a result of the
Yeah,
nurture,
which
right?
is
So
another
it's,
way of,
right, it's like you nurture a child and the child kind of like grows on its own as long as it's nurtured properly, for example. Right?
Yeah, I think nurturing would be like your decision to do that is like self-nurturing. That's one property. But at the same time, we're nurturing the group. Like having you guys here makes the social context richer,
Mhm.
right? And but there needs to be like a fundamental, like why is the Philosophy Society distinct from those people and people over there or whatever? Like what's that property that differentiates it, right?
Yeah.
And one of them is a value. Like how is the sample not representative of the population? You know what I mean? It's that we have to, at some degree, value what we think philosophy is.
Mhm.
And I think that's why when I have new people, I'm like, okay, just so you guys know, this is what I've got so far. And if you're like, fuck you, Achilles, this is bullshit. You know, you're a crazy man. You have nothing to say. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm at least willing to talk about it though, right? Like for politics, you know, like I'm adamantly against, you know, even if the propaganda that I watch, okay, it completely has skewed my view. I do believe that Putin has made some serious errors. If he doesn't think it's an error, then it's a psychological problem that he can't see it's an error. So I'm not sure if that's a false dichotomy, maybe not, but there's something going on there that requires heavy criticism, I believe. And I think we have a responsibility to each other as humanity to talk about it at the very least. And because there'll be a ripple effect. If we're more
Can I
clear,
ask you what Putin, there's so many things about Putin. What are you trying to, can you give me an example?
just the war in Ukraine,
Say it again?
just the war in
Oh,
Ukraine, just to
okay.
put that on
Gotcha.
token on there, or like Chechnya, you know, or like we could stack it pretty high. And this is just, if you want to exclude a psychological justification for his behavior, it's just, we could talk about power or certain political structures when you don't have free speech and consequences to that, you know, like there's certain things at like a political or
I'm not supporting him. I'm just.
no, it's cool. Yeah, no, 100%, bro. That's why we're here.
Thanks.
There's certain things socially, like at a group level, that will have political implications. Because I think political implications are not like, yeah. Again, how do you distinguish that? Like, what is political from just social stuff? The same thing. Like, why do we even use the word political? Why doesn't it matter? You know. And so I think it's because there's a different emergent phenomena occurring, like human rights. You know, it's not just social. It's like at almost an institutional level. You know, like we created it and then we enforce it. Like there's a process, and people that have roles with a policy hierarchy that dictates what they do, and there's all this power there. Like that whole thing, I would say, is political. It's not just like these people.
Yeah, I think on that topic, like when you look at topic of propaganda and misinformation, it's not exclusive to, let's say, Russia and, you know, this is happening globally in different forms. And I mean, in my own opinion, you could look at consumerism and consumption as another threat against humanity and, you know, a threat against free will, the concept of free will. And I think that when we just focus on one isolated aspect without looking at defining or redefining what democracy and free will looks like as a topic, that's where we limit, I guess, our ability to kind of influence our own environments. You know what I mean? That's my own opinion on that.
Yeah, that's really good. That's great.
That's very external.
Yeah, that's good. Like I think autonomy is important. I think there's something to be said about the free market, right? But the way that businesses and corporations put the accumulation of wealth over autonomy of people in like advertisements or like certain design things, like when they make a video game and then you have to like pay to like play it and stuff like that after you've already purchased it, and it's fixated on the same properties of slot machines, like a variable interval reinforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes it addictive. So I think there's definitely something to be said about that.
100%.
Or like even just certain products like fast food or things that we know that cause cancer. Like it's like we know that like cigarettes just aren't a good thing, right? Like making them illegal, maybe, you know, but then from the harm reduction perspective, Portugal has shown on like almost all measurable accounts that decriminalizing all drugs is the best way. You know, like we have that as a case study, and it's been like 30 years or something like that. They did in the 80s, right? So that's compelling. It's like, you know what I mean? And what there's this TED talk by this guy named Hare, and he communicates how when we criminalize somebody and we alienate them and isolate them, it actually perpetuates the addiction. But if you make people feel integrated in society, accepted and loved, and they can do whatever they need to do to go to the next level, like you don't put barriers on them getting jobs, right? You're a criminal now. Now you can't work anywhere. Like obviously, if there's a situation where the person has a psychological problem and they're going to cause harm to others, you know, like vulnerable people, like kids or like fucking, you know, whoever, you know.
Sarah, sorry to pronounce.
That's
Zara,
it, yeah.
sorry. Can you exemplify more, elaborate on you mentioned influences. Did you know?
Well, again, I mean, I think
influences?
this is a broad topic, but you could look at something as simple as like the tech age we're in, right? And how far do you want to go down the rabbit hole of like data privacy and how much you've been marketed on, like to, you know, daily, and, you know, perhaps some people that don't necessarily know that lens of how these institutions work, you know, that are falling prey like every day to these, you know, kind of subjects. But I don't want to take up too much time. I know we have a
Yeah, keep on talking. I'm gonna get this
run
thing.
out of time, so I think we can get started.
Okay. So we're gonna watch.
He's got an event after this, so yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna watch Waking Life, and I'm
Did you connect it?
gonna do that now. So
You
I'm gonna
have
stop.
watched this before.
I have. I've watched it like
Yeah,
3
I
times.
did.
Yeah, I've watched it like 30 times. I use it to teach, so it's like,
I love it. I've watched it once, so I'm happy to relive this moment with you guys. So appreciate it. Thank
very
you.
good, very good. Okay, so we'll see. So, okay, so everybody, Waking Life is a film about dreaming and about experience in general. And so, why is this relevant? Again, the Philosophy Society is that we come here to practice and train and then integrate back into society to help them be better, right? Everyone we interact with, we want to increase their well-being, right? And I would say there's objective ways that you can subjectively go out there and, do it as an art. But then we can focus on concrete things that will always work. And that's why it's also scientific. To be wise is to say, this is real. I'm going to do the real thing. I'm not just going to be like floating in the sky. And that's unwise, The mind is created wise so we can understand reality and do something. I was thinking about this today. Like, what is the thing that matters? Like, why is dying suck? Or suffering? It's because of the feeler. Like the most core basic unit of what you are, the thing that feels, you feel sad, you feel good, you feel whatever, That's the thing that matters.
Do you think that's the core? Or is there another core that you're not aware of, maybe the spirit or the soul?
Well, I would say they're the same thing.
Sure.
You can just translate it that way.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you think the spirit feels the way we feel with our senses, or does it feel different?
See, now he's going to keep on
You
going.
said it. I wanted to get it.
No, I can talk about that. I would just say that conceptually, that's why I don't believe in the soul. Like it's like on one side, like as a psychologist, like a becoming psychologist, however you want to define it, I don't have a PhD, but someone that thinks about these things and engages with people at that level. I'm compassionate to that, but I also see delusional thinking, as a property, and then the other properties that having faith or being religious provide for people, like a sense of community. It reduces existential angst. You're like, heaven's better than this, then it's great, like I should look forward to death. Why don't I kill myself? Just because God said so, because I can go to like this beautiful place, right? Like some people are really struggling with that, actually. And so, it has a function for the individual and as a social group. It's embedded in that political monster thing we talked about earlier,
Yeah. And it's been kind of corrupted with the churches and,
they want to,
yeah.
I want to say like religion and I guess faith could be
No, they're different.
separated because
That's
an
exactly right.
institution is
Yes.
not necessarily aligned to what you were saying.
Yeah.
And then community is with or without religion, right? Atheists have their community and their support as well. So I think that when it comes to these topics, I don't know, you get where I'm going with that premise, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. Like,
Sorry for interrupting.
so the analogy part, right, would be that religion has survived for very long, right? Humans kind of it just kind of happens, in different forms. And so, okay, there has to be something there that we need.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And so the way I look at it is, it's like you're like holding onto a ladder. That's your belief system. And it could be a long way down. I'm not sure, maybe it's not a big of a deal, but maybe it's like a long way down, right? Like with religious stuff, it's like God. It's the most important thing. It's more important than me, more important than you. It's more important than everything, right?
Mhm.
And so if it's all encompassing, that ladder is like transcendental. It's like, it's like you're holding on to reality. Because if you let go of that, like, well, then what? I'm absorbed into a black hole. Like I get ripped apart. Really? Like something at a spiritual level,
Mhm.
So I understand that. And I know that it's hard, but my role is like, I'm like a truth speaker. People hate me for it. They're like, oh, I kill this. And so
The ugly truth of things.
I have to learn to say it as a psychologist. I have to learn to say it in a way that the person can receive it. The philosopher is being the psychologist because they realize this is the wise thing to do, right? And so people, that's what faith is. If it doesn't make sense and it's confusing, it's okay, because it's not for you to know. Well, all you got to do is have faith that God has a plan and everything's going to be okay.
Well, faith is also an action. You can't say that you have faith in something if you don't do things to support your claim in that faith. So faith is not a belief, just like you can't say I'm a philosopher.
Yeah.
And not practice philosophy.
Sure.
Same thing with faith.
I agree
Okay.
with that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So then there would be degrees of the faithful.
Living the truth of it,
Mhm.
as opposed to just preaching, teaching,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
living as I can't- I
Czar.
haven't did-
Czar.
Sorry, love. As opposed to the institution of religion.
Okay,
See, as opposed to as Constantine's relating, that's a personal truth
Mhm.
that they can relate, and it could be applicable. If you can't apply anything in philosophy or any psychiatry or psychology or anything in any genre that could help you, if it's not applicable, like the I Ching, if it's not applicable, or
Yeah.
the Bible,
sure.
then why is it valid? Why is it? That's the whole premise of anything. If it's applicable in today's time, then apply it.
Mhm.
And you have to look at it that way. And even Socrates,
Mhm.
you know, the question,
Mhm.
the first inquiry, fighting against the mythological gods.
Okay.
See, that's the whole thing about it. For us to have that self-inquiry.
Yeah. And self-reflection too,
Exactly.
right? Yep, for sure. I think the self-inquiry is more demonstrated with Plato's dialogues using Socrates, right? So I recognize that, and my partial criticism towards like the four horsemen of atheism, like Dawkins, Hitchens, Sam Harris, and Dennett, is not that what they're saying isn't true. It's just that Dawkins, for sure, is just kind of an asshole to people sometimes, you know? And I think that there's a spectrum of cognitive capacity. Some people can reason and they understand concepts because of the way that their brain processes language. But other people, their brains may have not developed to its optimum level, meaning that they can actually do that task. And there could be brain damage, you know? And like the addictions point from before, or being too stressed has a negative effect on our brain state and our brain development. And so, yeah, so religion has a function, right? I'm going to take this approach, has a function. And so what is the functional equivalent? That way I'm just not knocking you off the ladder, right? So you don't have to use faith. Like faith is something, yes, I agree with you that you're doing. And psychologically, I would explain it as a compartmentalization. It's just a separation of things. And it has a utility. Like I would say it's not its validity that it could be valid and not have any use for us. You know, like 1 + 1 = 2 doesn't actually matter in this moment, but it's still sound, right? As a linguistic representation. And so, or a bunch of concepts, whatever you want to say. So, yeah, it's there. The functional part's important. And so part of the philosophy society is to say that I welcome all religious groups. Like, why is this not a cult? Because cults close themselves off to society and their family, and they take money from them. And there's an authoritarian leader that it's just a brooding craziness. You know, like how many cults produce something really good? I don't think any. Right? They fucking kill themselves when comets go by. That's not a good thing to do. That's worse than, you know, a lot of religious stuff for sure. Right? But it's still a social organization. It's and we talked before about the political stuff. What is it that is going on socially or politically that has these other political phenomena emerge from it? Right? And so we could also take that same kind of approach and apply it to just social organizations in general and say, what is it about cults that make them go into where they go, you know? And we don't really want that. We want something else. You know what I mean? And what is it that religion does? And it does some good things, but then there are some other things that like we would unanimously say that that's just not a good thing, you know? And then there's the political implications like Israel, Palestine, Israel. Like there's certain things there that, you know, we need to figure it out, right? And so if we can know, again, there's lots of criticisms. There's no such thing as truth and all these things. I'm going to say this. We can know practically what the correct answer is. If we learn it and then we can say it, right? Philosophically, you could say there is no correct answer. It's just a process, but that then stalls us from doing any action, which goes to your applicability point. And I do see that criteria. I go even one step further. It has to be economical. The philosophy society has to generate revenue so that it can expand and then people can benefit from it more, right? How do we do that?
Although economics, overall good for the people as opposed to the elite, and negating the lower class.
So this is
and that's what happens in the social structures of certain behaviors that certain people in the lower classes are subjugated to certain. What would you think? How would you consider the lower classes? Because the elite See, if you say economics,
Yeah.
has to be applicable for all people, as opposed to certain classes, and then that's why we have an upheaval, and that's what the problem is, an underlying problem that internationally where we are.
Okay,
So how do we solve that?
Yeah.
See, that's the ugly truth that people don't want to hear.
It's the same answer for all the questions.
Exactly.
It's the philosophy study. And I'm going to explain why, right? And it's not just, but there's a social organism that I think is the solution. I'm just branding it with this name, right? Because kind of using the connection of wisdom to justify why I'm branding it that way.
Mhm.
So there's the disparity between socioeconomic classes, right? Or wealth and income. That's one problem that is a standard problem of today. And then there's also the political issue of like tyranny or political like regimes that take away from like human rights and increase human suffering from a utilitarian kind. There's more people suffering, right? And so when you talk about the disadvantaged groups, like that thing, again, some people may not be in a position where they can actually comprehend certain information because that's just the brains they have. Maybe with Neuralink, we can give them that capacity, just like someone who had a wheelchair, it's easier for them to get around, right? We can become blind. Like you can get hit in the head and your brain doesn't work the same, right? That's a different thing than what you were talking about though. What you were talking about with the self-sabotage thing, that is expectation awareness. That is like a certain set of selves through some awareness, and I don't like to use the word manipulation, but like changing of things, you can rearrange it, right? So that you're not, I just have to respond to that, so that you're not, so that you are meeting your goals, but that you're doing it at your pace. And I think that's the best way to look at it. When we get into the self-shaming part, like I made a mistake and now I'm upset that I made the mistake, I'm actually increasing the amount of suffering. And that's why feeling good is so, it's the first book I teach, because I'm like, most of our, like wellness is feeling good, you know, it's not suffering unnecessarily. And I would argue the most of our wellness comes from suffering comes from our emotions, which is relevant to our thought processes and how we're thinking about things and our relationships with others, right? We all have different interests or whatever, like because we're different people. And then our relationships can become confusing if we don't know how to communicate in a way so that we feel good and that we feel good together, right? As a group. I'm trying to make it very general, but also it makes sense, right? And so, like the self thing, I think we have to just talk more about it, you know? Just be my friend, we'll talk, you're good. If you want me to be my counselor, I can counsel you or whatever, I can be your counselor, you do that too.
You
be my friend.
Counselor?
Yeah, we do both.
I don't think you need one.
No, we'll do both. Yeah, I do. Fuck, man.
I
Honestly.
think we all do, don't we?
When you're high on the mountain and then you slip, it's a long way down.
Right.
Elaborate on constant self-sabotaging. So it's quite broad in various different people. I mean, some people are just circumstances just are overwhelming, and that's the sad part. And some people are they have no let's say person to aid them, and they're isolated and they're home alone. And they're always hitting obstacles or roadblocks. And see, the self-sabotage can be very broad.
I like that. Yeah, that's a very practical solution.
Yeah, exactly. See, and if there's no guiding person or someone there to lend a hand, then you know what I mean?
Well, that's again, so religion has that function, like they give stuff to the poor, like they do certain things socially. The philosophy study has the same capacity to do all those things, but then more, because it doesn't rely on that compartmentalization of faith or the doctrines that religious groups kind of have to stick to. That's what makes them what they are.
Can I mention something?
Of course.
I think you, on 2 occasions you conflated faith with religion.
Okay.
Those are not the same.
All right, sure. Sorry. No, yeah, I'm sorry.
So because the way I see it is that my faith is in a personal relationship that I have with God, right? So that personal relationship is not described in the religious texts, right? It's somehow delineated through stories, and I can relate to some of the stories and maybe apply them abstractly to my situation. But I don't. My relationship is that the religion interferes with my relationship with God.
Wow,
that makes sense.
That's a really interesting thing. I respect that a lot.
Yeah. So that's why I think for some people, religion is there to kind of like, there's some things to grasp at, or like a ladder to get from point A to point B. But if you make it, I don't know how to explain this properly, but it's like you're missing the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'll say one thing because I'm kind of all over the place here. Do you guys remember the movie Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee? And he's training his pupil. And Bruce Lee says it's like a finger pointing away to the moon. And the pupil looks at the finger and he slaps his head and he says, don't look at the finger or you're going to miss all the heavenly glory. So religion is the finger pointing to the transcendent, but it itself is not the transcendent.
Well,
Yeah.
sorry,
No, I get that.
Sorry
That's
to
good.
interject. Don't think.
Feel.
So it's basically like,
Yeah,
so you don't think, it's in the instant moment.
that's exactly right.
So because if you think like the thinker, I think therefore I am. No, that's a negative. I don't describe that.
Neither do I.
Okay.
But I know how it's interesting how you relate it to your religion, to your faith.
Yes.
That was a pretty good analogy.
Yeah.
Interesting. But Bruce Lee was talking more, don't think, because instinctively at that moment when it rises, you can't think see, if you think the action, it's like a pre-rehearsal.
Yes.
It's a delay.
Right.
It has to happen instantaneously.
That's right.
So that's what, but it's interesting, your take about the moon.
Yeah.
That's just, I'm not trying to take it away from
No, I think what you're saying is perfectly aligned with what I'm trying to get at, because the book, right, or the words are the thoughts that people have written down. So you're focusing on the thoughts as opposed to the action or the instinct, which is your connection with the transcendent, with the divine. So I think it's the same thing.
Can I ask, the soul that you're referring to that you don't prescribe to, can you don't believe in the soul? Is that?
Oh yeah.
I
Well,
just want to know
there's many reasons.
no, because I'm just touching base with it's almost like a beacon sometimes, like intuition.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking
sure.
about soul that somehow you go to this pre-invented heaven where there's plumbing up there.
Sure. Yeah.
So you see
Whatever.
what I'm saying? Where the rapture, where our body,
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
clothes remain, and our bodies are up in heaven.
Yeah.
And we have plumbing in heaven. There's toilet paper in heaven.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
These are
I
these
know.
fanatics of religion institutions, as opposed to a faith, where the intuition of soul connection, where sometimes all of a sudden you're somewhere and something's leading you that you're not even aware of. In intuition, where there's like a soul light guiding you. That's all I'm saying.
That's cool.
So
Yeah.
to me, I'm not going to be presumptuous or assumptuous about you, but I do feel that you do have a connection intuitively in the way you carry yourself.
Thanks, man. That's
So
great.
it's an intuition, and for me, I see there's a soul connection. That's all.
Yeah.
If you could tell me, I'm not saying a soul for religious.
You believe in
religious-
God now.
No, I'm not saying that. No, I'm not saying that. See, I'm not saying that. I'm respecting his atheist.
No, it's okay.
See, that's all I'm saying.
Like again, being spiritual, I think that is what that's what we were talking about basically. And for you just call it God, and if I was going to ascribe a religious context, it would be Spinoza, right? Like a pantheistic relationship with our experience or the cosmos, whatever you want to say. Experience is pretty solid. Cosmos, you have to take one step, in your reasoning process, like in its existence, because maybe it doesn't exist.
You foreshadowed Waking Life, by the way. I don't know if you picked that up with the pantheism when the professor's talking about every moment being God.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Should we try to get this going?
Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was like, I should just get on the board and start writing stuff because that's what I do,
Oh, I'm sure this tends to happen in every session, right?
Yeah.
Topic to topic to topic, and
Yeah.
Well, you guys are new, so I want you guys to feel that you're expressing yourselves, and I want you to feel that exercise, right? That's part of the practice. It's not about praying; it's about talking about ideas. And you said, "I'm all over the place." This is the place to be all over the place,
Right.
Yeah. And then you get a better sense of yourself, and then when you go out, you're like, "Boom, this is what's going on," and that's good for you, and it's good for everybody else. Right.
Yeah. That's my hope. I try to generalize questions too, like, oh, in my life, and I'm going through this and that. Like nobody cares, right? That's why I try to.
I care. We care.
But that's why I try to generalize it to make it applicable, so everybody can say, I have something like that going on potentially, currently, or in my past, or coming up in my future.
That's why I studied this stuff for however long I studied it.
Right.
Because I was like, yeah, I had like some trauma and stuff like that when I was a kid. And I was like, I just looked at I dissociated slightly and just like objectified myself and used it as a case study to understand stuff.
Sorry.
Thank you. It's fine. And then I learned to generalize it in a way that applies to everybody else. I was like, if this is what I got, I'm not just going to like abandon the only experiences I have. I have to just fucking make.
Use
Right.
it.
It's like you got a bunch of shit. You just got to use it as like fertilizer. That's just what you got to do. Right.
Right.
And then any other way. So I wrote a chapter on this. I call it like inverting trauma. You know, like you have an experience that was bad, and instead of it being bad, you just turn it into a good thing.
Some of the best people I know come from the results of exactly what you're describing.
Yeah, see, there you go. That's amazing. I love that.
Can I circle back to Angelo's point at the beginning? He said he mentioned meditation, and I'm wondering, what is your perspective on Eastern philosophy? Because when these people reach enlightenment, whatever that is, I don't not believe in it. I believe in it, but they experience something that you cannot cognize. That's what it is, right? But you can't put that into critical thinking, because it seems like a big part of your philosophy, and I think that's good because human beings are like this too, is the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah, well,
right, and that makes sense.
You need that piece of you.
Sure, but do you think that there is a deeper part of us, a part of us that we kind of override with all of this thinking, and when we can remove that layer, we can be in touch with something?
Well, you are consciousness. Consciousness is like the lowest common denominator for myself. Because without awareness or some kind of conscious experience, like what do you really have? It's plugged in right here.
Yeah, this is the only one.
Like, what do you really have, right? And so we can just watch it on the laptop. It's just gonna suck because it's not a TV.
That is gonna suck.
But
can we make the TV work?
I'm trying.
I'm trying.
Yeah, me too.
I might as well go sit in my bed,
Yeah.
Input, yes.